initiatives. And so I welcome you into taking this international conference heading onto the global contours by briefing and sharing the profile of Dr. Wolfgang Feitzer, who is the professor and course director of PGDM IB, Schmellenbach School of Business and Economics, Cologne University of Applied Sciences, Germany. Sir has taught in the countries of both China and Germany for almost past 2 decades. He is a member of the Developing Nations Committee in the Association for Social Policy and has been known to publish his knowledge through leading research papers at both national and international journals and conferences. We welcome you, sir, as the chairperson for technical session 2. We are also very fortunate to welcome Mr. Glenn Root, sir, who comes with the rich experience of more than a decade and has been known to share his knowledge through both NGOs and business school alike. Well, coming from the strong background and working with these mosaic of industries based onto the tripod of technology, leadership, and business, Sir is presently the director as Global Learning and Development, Wilhelmsen Ship Services, Norway. We welcome you, sir, as the session panelist. We are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Marjo Lisa Tenunen, who is a professor from Shanghai University, China. Well, ma'am comes with more than 1.5 decades of experience from Finland and has been known to be a high-end foreign expert, along with getting loads of medals of honors and for sharing our expertise across various projects. We welcome you, ma'am. We are also very fortunate to have with us Professor Zhang Sir, who is Director, External Affairs and International Education, Zhejiang Technical Institute of Economics, China, and who is also associated as coordinator of UNESCO UNIVOC Center in China. Sir has about 4 decades of rich experience. We welcome you, sir. Also, how can we not have Japan when we call it International Conference at JIMS Kalkaji? We are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Sonisa, who is associated professor at Faculty of Policy Sciences, Shizuoka University of Art and Culture, Japan, since 2015. What more to say? There had been this team of experts, and I hand over to Dr. Feitzer as the chairperson of the session to please commence. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jyoti, for this very kind introduction of our panel. I would like to share my screen now with you so that we can start over here. Well, good morning from Cologne, Germany, and namaste, and good afternoon to India. It's my pleasure to have 2 hours of intensive discussion and presentations on the subject of, well, business sustainability in the post-COVID era. We are going to have a number of really interesting presentations, some of them focusing on the, say, internal management side of firms, the others more on the external environment that firms after COVID are going to face. You kindly introduced the panel members, Glenn Rudd, Maria Lisa Tenunen, Tony Chang, and Hidekazu Sony. So I don't have to do that and can save time, which I really appreciate very much. So I would like to delve right into the matter and present you with what I'm going to do at the very start of this session. The title of my presentation is Coping with EU Sustainability Regulations. And this overview should give you an idea where we are heading in this short presentation. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce you to our institution. Then we'll have a look at what the major concern after the pandemic is. We will then go into more detail regarding legislation that might be restricting the opportunities of foreign suppliers to the European and the German market. And we'll focus particularly on the competitive pressure that India might face in the context of other comparable exporters. And for that example, in my study, I've taken the BRICS countries. And in the end, we'll try to figure out some strategic solutions for Indian exporting industries. So this is what I would like to discuss with you. Just a few words about my background. I've been working for TH Cologne, University of Applied Sciences in Western Germany. Actually, we are the largest of that kind. Our key feature is very close cooperation with firms, with corporations. That's why we put so much, we stress so much the term applied science, because we are close to those who actually use what we've developed. And in particular, this paper was developed and discussed in the research unit Sustainability, Institutions, Management, and Markets. And where we actually combine the whole range of activities from research that has a very strong sustainability focus all the way down to consulting and training, well, basically combining all the resources of our university. The focus of my own talk is basically that I'm afraid I cannot see my own slide at the moment. Just a minute, I have to reorganize my screen. Okay, so I talked about where the attention of policymakers is turning to after the pandemic, and it obviously, after President Biden's climate summit 2 days ago, it's going to be back towards climate change, and this is something that corporations all over the world will have to adjust to, because this attention to climate change is accompanied by regulations that major countries are discussing at the moment and will be implementing pretty soon. The environmental regulations are tightened, and this no doubt is a strong challenge to firms all over the globe, and particularly to suppliers from outside the EU and the United States. Dear doctor said, I see a sign I should let people enter. Is this my task, or would somebody else deal with letting people enter the session? As you can see here, the upper part of this graph on the right-hand side is all climate-oriented, environment-oriented, and that was for the US, and the figure here on the left shows that basically 37%, more than a third of the expenditure of the European Union goes to climate investment and reforms, and another 20% to digitalization, which in our view, in the European view, is tightly connected with climate adjustment. That is, digitalization of energy systems is something that is high on the agenda here. So a large chunk of these multi-trillion investment packages of the US and EU is going towards climate issues. This, of course, affects firms and countries outside the US and EU, and in particular those that are closely connected with the supply chain towards the US and the EU. And here I will now focus mostly on the EU. When you look at how regulators actually dealt with supply chains, you see that in 2015, actually that started when Great Britain issued the first regulations about sustainable supply chains. France followed pretty soon. The UN Human Rights Council issued drafts and so on. So in 2021, 2022, we face a number of regulations on social sustainability in supply chains and on environmental sustainability within supply chains, which means that the firms within these supply chains have to readjust their strategy once these regulations are in place. And that's exactly what I would like to discuss now. Here is another overview, a more colorful impression of what European countries so far have done with regard to environmental legislation that might be affecting supply chains, international supply chains. So you see that a large part of Europe has been active, and the European Union as a body itself is on the way of acting. I would like to present two cases to you. The first is a law that is hotly debated at the moment in Germany, but that looks likely to be passed by Parliament. And it's the so-called German Lieferkettengesetz, which means responsible supply chain law, which applies to companies with more than 500 employees, which are located in Germany. That means there would be even foreign companies that are located in Germany would be affected. The reason is that over the past couple of years, only a fifth, roughly, of German large firms did monitor human rights along their supply chains, which was considered to be too low a figure by the government. And that put them into action. Said, okay, if you companies don't perform better in that regard, we will have to pass legislation. And that's what's happening right now. The goal is to encourage cooperation between the German importers and foreign suppliers, especially regarding the risk of violated social standards. So even if nothing has happened, when there is a risk, a company is held liable for that risk alone. Interestingly, environmental damage is only relevant as far as it might impact workers in companies within the supply chain. But of course, there's this interlinkage between environmental and social sustainability. Well, what's going to happen? There will be the requirement of an annual due diligence report about the sustainability of the supply chain. That means a German firm importing from India, from China, Brazil, Russia, whatever, they will have to talk to their suppliers there and say, listen, tell me, what have you done regarding social sustainability? What have you done regarding environmental sustainability? Can you guarantee that your processes are in line with the German legislation? And can you guarantee that the processes in your supplier's supply chain, so further up the supply chain, are they all in line with the German law? This is a big change. It means that and as complex as supply chains are, this affects a large number of firms in the tier 1 countries and in the tier 2+ countries. So it does have it's kind of a nuclear option for the government, and they will, in case of violation, levy fines, which are considered will be a percentage of the total turnover of the firm located in Germany. So even if they have a tiny share of imports from South Africa and there's some violation of social rights in South Africa, the total turnover of that firm will be taken as a basis for the fine. So this is very threatening to some companies. And that's why it's so hotly debated. The only exception, that's interesting, that may be a way out, is the membership in a standard setting industry association. In other words, if you have something like the bio or organic farming label that is more or less universally accepted, and the standards are set and they're accepted by most countries, then, and if something like that can be created, then the pressure on individual companies must be much, much lower. The second case I would like to present to you is the carbon leakage law, which calls for the adjustment of, say, an adjustment tax at the border for products entering the European Union, and if these products were produced in a very carbon intensive way, and the originating country did not, say, impose environmental tariffs or emissions trading prices on this carbon emissions in the originating country. Again, here in Q2 2021, the European Commission, which is basically our government here, is expected to table a proposal, and that might become law pretty soon. And of course, this would raise the cost of foreign producers who do not pay the same amount of carbon tax or emissions by the same amount of emission certificates as they are standard in the European Union. In other words, in face of these regulations, the exporters to the EU will compete on their sustainability profiles with regard to social and with regard to environmental sustainability. If Europe passes this legislation, basically over 25% of global trade will be affected. So many companies will have to deal with this issue. There are two ways out, or two possible venues. One is that the companies adjust their total production processes, or that they create kind of a dual production system, one for the EU and the other for the non-EU customers. That depends very much on the say, clientele of these companies, but these are the most likely strategic opportunities for firms affected by the legislation. In the end, it may be assumed that in the midterm, the EU again achieves the role of a global standard setter. That's what happened with the General Data Protection Regulation, which was evoked here, and then basically set the standards for firms and individuals across the globe. If that happens, then of course there would be a level playing field for all companies around the world, because they have to adhere to the same regulations. But this is a possibility, but it's by no means sure. How do German companies deal with this issue of the regulation? Well, there is a strong resistance by those who fear that they lack transparency within their supply chain, and by those who believe that their imports are subject to very low carbon tax levies. And apart from that, from those industries, most are pretty positive. As you can see here, the environmental technology firms in particular hope that this legislation will be passed. You see on the right-hand side, these green areas, these are the positive positioning of companies, whereas the share who see it negatively is relatively small. That would be the red circles on the left-hand side. And in the middle, this dark gray area is basically undecided. So we see a majority of these modern firms who are engaged in the environmental technology sector. They very much favor the laws, and they have a strong, a strong lobby in the European and the German policymaking level. So we can expect the law to be passed. Okay. The question now is, how can we compare the competitiveness of firms? And here, our model that we use basically looks at the sustainability of our supplying countries from a German or European perspective, and on the sustainability of their supplying countries, assuming that the industry that imports the product to Europe is the same as the tier 2 countries import themselves. That is, in other words, when machinery is imported to Europe, then we assume in this model that we use that the machinery industry in India or in South Africa, for example, imports products from their suppliers of machinery from the same industry as well. And we then we use this Sustainable Society Index, which is actually produced by us here in Cologne as a measure of sustainability in both social and environmental terms. And we weight the import shares of the countries in the supply chains in order to get a kind of a sustainability index for a particular industry that is imported to Europe. Here a brief description of the indicator that we use. I'm presenting this here because many questions say, wait a minute, why do you use the SSI and not the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal indices? And the answer is because they are too cumbersome. They are not time consistent. That is, sometimes they reach until 2011. Some data are running until 2018 or 19. And this is nothing that we can use when we look at legal requirements. And here the SSI is a lot more time consistent, meaning that the base year for our analysis is the same. At the moment, we use data from 2018, which is the latest that you can get. But the general structure of the SSI is following the triple bottom line concept, like the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So there's some justification and for replacing the SDGs by the SSI when it comes to firm and sustainability analysis. Okay, let's have a look at India. In the framework of the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, we used our model that I briefly sketched in order to look at the SSI scores for these countries. And when you look at this graph here, you see that all countries actually perform better in their social sustainability area, which is in our model called human well-being, HUW, than in the two other triple bottom line categories. Strongest in the social sphere are Russia and China. India is more or less in the middle, and Brazil is lagging behind. What we also see is that when we look at the blue columns, we see that actually India, together with China, is relatively strong in economic transformation. That is the whole society on the way to becoming more sustainable. There, India has a relatively bright future, but at the moment, in terms of, for example, actual environmental protection, India is weaker, for example, than Brazil. So that plays a role when companies look for suppliers and they say, okay, where should we go in order to reduce the risk of violation of environmental and social regulations? They will look at these data and say, well, okay, if I want to avoid social sustainability problems, China and Russia are a better place than, for example, Brazil, India, and South Africa. So this is a determinant in the decision-making process as we observe it. The companies that are asking for our data, they say, well, we need exactly to know this marker on that marker, which of those might create the lowest problems for us. And that's basically the work that we do with the SSI, the Sustainable Society Index. Okay, let's have a direct comparison for two industries that are very important for both China and India. This is what I am focusing on, namely the HS Harmonized System Codes 6162, which cover apparel, and HS 84, which covers machinery. And when we compare India and China, we see that with regard to social sustainability in these industries, India is on par with China. In the environmental sustainability area, India is on par with China in apparel, and it is leading in machinery. So in other words, machinery importers in the EU might prefer India over China when importing machinery regarding environmental conditions in the supply chain. Interestingly, India in general is ahead in economic sustainability, but it's behind in apparel. So this is an interesting difference in performance, which I cannot explain at the moment, but it's important for the exporters in India to know, okay, apparel might be seen more critical than machinery from the perspective of the importers. In other words, the priority for India would be to improve social conditions in the apparel industry in order to stay competitive in the eye of foreign importers. Let's now shed a view on the carbon adjustment border mechanism. The question here is how much more, or how much does a company have to pay in terms of additional tariffs if we sell to a European market? And in this graph, you see this green column in the center. That is the OECD average of taxation of carbon emissions. Germany is almost the same level, right next to this green column. And that is, in this graph, it means they basically pay 40% inside these area, the OECD area, 40% of the required 60 euros per ton. Now, if there is a border adjustment mechanism, that means that countries that pay less than those 40% have to make up for this lack of payment at the border, which means when you look at the lower left of this graph, that Indian exporters to the European Union, if the CIBM is installed, on average would pay 28 euros per ton of CO2. South Africa would have to pay an additional 29, China would have to pay an additional 31, and Brazil would have to pay an additional 34 euros, when selling products that have a carbon intensity to the OECD market. So we see here the additional burden, the financial burden on the exporters to the OECD area, which is more or less representative of what's happening inside the European Union. And as you can see, Germany is right next to the same level as OECD, so it applies to Germany in particular. The question is, well, if this really happens, how much are exporters in India and in China forced to comply with this? Can we circumvent it? Can we actually say, okay, hey, let's not sell to the EU anymore? Or is there a chance that the EU downplays or reduces their requirements because they are dependent on imports from India and China? And this is the question that I'm raising here on this graph. The upper one shows the mutual dependency of the EU and its trading partners in the machinery industry, ages 84. And here you see the dependence of the suppliers, that is, of the BRICS countries, on exports to Europe. Exports to Europe have a share of between 17 and 28% of their total exports of machinery to Europe. So Europe plays, in the case of South Africa, well, not exactly a third, but almost a third role. The lowest share is for Russia, with 17% of machinery exports which go to the EU. When you look at the opposite, how dependent is the EU on these imports? Well, they are dependent to a lower degree, but they are in some way dependent on imports from China and Russia, with a share of 12 and 30% of total EU imports, whereas the other countries, South Africa, Brazil, and India, don't really play a role. That is, they don't have a bargaining power, so to say. And when you look at the apparel sector, interestingly, that's something that surprised me as well. I would have expected a different empirical result. The dependency on apparel imports from China is stronger than the EU dependency on imports from China, is stronger than the one on imports from India. But in both cases, the opposite dependency, both countries depend more on exports to Europe than Europe depends on imports from those two countries. So again, the bargaining power of the exporting countries is relatively weak, and the stronger pressure to adjust is on India. Let's sum up what can be done. Well, we see that after the pandemic, the return to sustainability as a global concern means opportunities and threats. If companies adjust, they may gain a competitive advantage. If they are not able to do so, they might lose a considerable part of the market share. When we look at the legislation at the European and German level, at the moment, this is a short-term threat. It will be very hard for companies to adjust quickly to these legislations. But as I said, this opportunity that we see is in the long term. The companies should actually prepare for aligning with global standards if these standards that are discussed at the EU level at the moment are adopted by other major areas like the United States. Then this will put a lot of pressure, and early adjustment would be a prudent activity. For Indian companies, it means that they should have a look at their own tier 2 suppliers. That is, where do they get their inputs from, and what is the social and environmental score for their own suppliers. This is something that Indian firms will certainly do, but the other BRICS firms will do that as well. And in particular, when it comes to the apparel industry, the Indian firms, I think, are well advised to think about their social sustainability scores and maybe upgrading their processes there. So this is my conclusion for a strategic reorientation of Indian firms facing the new legislation in Europe in general and Germany in particular. If you're interested in the sources, I will be happy to to provide more information to you. Also a paper that, if you're interested, can be sent to you. Thank you very much for your attention. I assume that we are going to have questions regarding presentations at the end of the of all presentations. Is that correct?
That's right, Dr. Veit. That's right. At the end.
Okay. So in this case, I would like to invite Mr. Glenn Rood to present his talk to us. Glenn, would you come forward, please?
Absolutely. Should I share my presentation from this side, or how do we do this? Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much for the early introduction, Jyoti, and I'm also honored to be here today. This is my first time at this conference, and I will be talking about leadership in the post-COVID era. But the way I see it, we're still in the middle of the COVID crisis, and this is, of course, affecting all of us heavily on multiple levels, including personal, professional, local, and global. And we also see that some countries have opened up, and life is starting to come back to normal, while other countries are really struggling. I read an article yesterday about what's happening in India now. And clearly going through very, very difficult times in this period. And what we see all around the world here is basically lockdown, job insecurity, job losses, increased physical and also mental sickness, and unfortunately rising death rates. So I believe that in this context, leadership is extremely important, which I will talk about today. I will not only focus on the post-COVID era, I will focus on the current situation because this will continue for some time. And I will look at how we in the Wilhelmsen group, where I work, are particularly approaching this situation. A few words about Wilhelmsen group. I will talk about the good and the bad side of COVID, because there's a lot of talks about the bad side of COVID. But there are also something good happening, as at least we see in our company on a global level. And then I will go more into how do we approach leadership development now during this crisis and also in the period following. Just a few words about Wilhelmsen Group. It's an very old company, established in 1861. It's 160 years this year. So we are basically located almost everywhere there is a ship or any type of maritime related activities. About 2,200 locations around the world. We serve more than 50% of the global merchant fleet, covering everything from marine products like chemicals, gases, cylinders, ropes, and so forth, as well as all types of services. Almost since the early days of this company has been very international. Today, 125 nationalities located in 74 countries around the world. So let's look a bit on the good and the bad side of COVID as we see it. And I will look at some internal research we have done, but also some external macro trends that we see going on in several countries. First and foremost, I think the flexibility in working from home has been perceived to be quite positive for a lot of people. People don't need to commute to work. A lot of people express they like the flexibility to sit and work from home. And what we have seen a side effect of that, positive side effect of that, is actually for some people life has slowed down a bit. So people have found new ways to connect with colleagues, also reconnect with loved ones. We see through some of the surveys we have done that people feel they are more connecting now with other people, which is very important because it also creates a better and more healthier balance in life. Which leads me over to the third one here, that some people have found out that life is not only work. So some people have taken up new hobbies, going back to some of their old hobbies. We see people actually do more exercise. They're living healthier, which is a positive thing, because this obviously has an impact on productivity and general mental and physical health. On the more macro perspectives, street crimes is going down. Looking at environmental issues, significant reductions in air pollution, which is then improving life quality for many and reducing, of course, deaths, and reductions in car traffic volume and car accidents. This is clearly seen. For example, in my case, I haven't been at the office for almost 1 year now. And the other day I went out driving, and it was like I felt I was kind of in a ghost town. And I don't know if you know too much about Norway, but it's not the most populated country, but still there is, during kind of normal life, there is a lot of activities going on in the traffic here as well. And it was like, it looked almost like there had been a bomb or something. There was nobody out, to be honest. The bad side, the depressing side, we hear about it all the time. Social isolation, loneliness, anxiety and depression, fear, uncertainty and sorrow, of course, losing jobs, sickness. Some people cannot travel to see their family, so it leads to a lot of frustrations and also fear. Even though we see some people has found out that life is not only work and they are able to actually get better routines in their life, we also see a significant increase in disruption of what we call normal routines, eating habits, exercise, sleep, work routines as well, which is disrupting their kind of normal routines and creating a lot of personal problems, and also affecting the people around them. Even though we have positive things happening on the macro perspective, there is unfortunately a growing increase in family violence, alcohol and drug abuse, significant measurable impact on the economy, and unfortunately the significant increase in mental health issues. If you look at this slide here, this is taken from the source of Statista. The percentage of workers who are reporting mental health symptoms since the coronavirus outbreak. It's quite a depressive reading, where you can see that 53.8% express more emotionally exhaustion, a very high increased sadness in day-to-day life. People feel generally more confused, looking at the insomnia, which is obviously having a very negative effect on the general life quality and so forth. So you might ask the question, what does this really have to do with leadership? And the way I see it has a lot to do with leadership, both on the good and the bad sides. And it really will impact how leadership is conducted, also post-COVID. Because if you go back to the slide I was showing earlier, maybe people want to have more flexibility in their working routines, so leaders may have to facilitate for that. If there is an increase in social isolation or loneliness and disruption of normal routines, leaders may have to find ways to facilitate for that. Maybe companies have to offer new and different social services than they're doing today, or promote creative ways of to change life habits and so forth. And if you look at this one again, looking at the significant increase of people, workers in any company. So it's not isolated to certain type of industries or companies, it goes across any company. This clearly has implications for leaders, as they may have to deal with employees carrying some of these symptoms and feelings. So if you look at the implication for leadership development, so we have been looking at this and thinking, how is this affecting how we work with our leaders to develop them in order to be able to handle these challenges but also to grasp some of the opportunities that comes out of the good side of this as well. So what we have done, we have radically, I would say, radically transformed how we approach leadership development in the Wilhelmsen Group. So I will take you through 7 different points that we have made changes to. First and foremost, if you look at the corporate values, any company has corporate values. And it depends on how they look upon it. For some companies, it's basically just values that are there. Some people may not even know what the values are. They can't even remember them. And we, I would say, had not a too strong focus on our corporate values. They are there. People know what they are. But what we are seeing now, also in our leadership development, that we focus very strongly in building a stronger sense of purpose. And that leaders really must live the corporate values. So we put a lot of emphasis on what are these values, what does these values mean to you as a leader, and what does it mean to you as a leader leading your people and leading the business as well. The second part, I would say, we had a very strong focus on personal resiliency. So leaders went through different leadership development programs. It was very much focusing on them. How can they strengthen their personal resiliency? But now what we have changed towards, we have a much more holistic approach to this. So we look at, yes, it's important for you to strengthen your personal resiliency, because if you're not strong yourself, how can you then support others? So we connect building personal resiliency with team, as well as the organizational resiliency and the capabilities to work across the organization. Which kind of leads me over to the third point, is that leadership development used to be focusing very much on personal development, whether it's resiliency or any other type of topics. But now we have a much more holistic approach to leadership, looking at leading self, leading others, and leading business, and doing this in a very systematic and structured approach. Excuse me. The fourth one was very much focused on training and individual learning. The big shift we have done now, going back to the introduction that you gave, Jyoti, we have a much more holistic approach to learning now. So because we believe that learning in isolation is not enough. So people really have to learn. They need to focus on sharing and practice. And we also focus on the structured and systematic approach to application of the learning. Because what we have realized is that, I mean, we can learn as much as we want, but if people are not confident or capable to put the learning into practical use, this knowledge basically doesn't have very much value. So that's why we're following this 70-20-10 approach to learning, which is basically focusing on learning, which is a 10 part, sharing, which is a 20 part, and practice. And then you have this 70 part, which is actually taking this to market. The next point is very interesting because traditionally HR and learning and development functions has been seen to be the ones that are responsible for competence development. So every time there is a business function or a division, they come to the HR and learning development department and says, we need some training. The learning development people develop that training and they implement it. But what we have seen now is we're changing this. So this is not that the learning and development or the HR function is responsible for competence development. It's the leader who is responsible for competence development. But the HR and the learning and development function, they facilitate for it. And this may sound easy in theory, but in practical terms, this is a radical shift in the role as the leader, as the competence manager. That means they really have to drive it. And they also need to be much more clearer on what should be the focus, on what needs to be developed, but equally important to support and follow up the employees when they actually develop and have the chance to take the competence and put it into real life practice. Leadership development used to be a program over a short period of time. Could be a leadership development program conducted over a year. Now we have changed this. Leadership development is not a program anymore. It's a journey that starts, but it never ends. So that means as a leader in Wilhelmsen, if you join this company, you will be developing yourself through various types of competence development initiatives on a continuous journey every year, as long as you are in this company. And this is interlinked with the final point we have related to this. It used to be, yes, leadership development over a specific period, and also for a selected few leaders. It was almost like a little bit of a lottery. So this year, this 30 or 50 leaders go through a leadership development program, and then maybe next year you won't get any leadership development. Now, what we have done now is we're saying that leadership development is not for a selected few leaders. It's for all the leaders at all time, and it starts and it never ends. So that means that no one is left behind. Everybody goes through the similar topics. So we are creating a common language and creating a unified approach to developing our leaders and also implementing the leadership development we go through. So when I say all leaders at all levels, in practical terms, how we have done this is we have split them into 3 segments. So you have the executive seniors at the high level, you have the middle managers or leaders at level 2, and then we have the frontline managers. And they have a split, of course, according to more strategic or larger geographical scope at the high complexity at the high level, and then down the more operational and limited geographical function or scope. And we target, the topics are the same, but we target the topic and the focus for the different leadership groups. And so what we always do here, we start with executives and the seniors, so they go through it, as you see here, for piloting the content, because then we can make adjustments for the second group. And when the second group comes in, the executive seniors have been through exactly what the middle managers will go through, and they will also then function as support for the middle managers. And the same when the frontline managers goes through this, the middle managers functions as support. So you get this integrated approach, and everybody goes through it. The CEO is going through this initiative, all the way down to supervisors at the frontline level. Very quickly on the methodology and approach, just so you see how we approach this. It's modular based, so we conduct probably 2 to 3 modules annually. Typically elements of course, key learning objectives. We have a digital learning section. Everything is, of course, now digital, and it will also continue to be so in the post-COVID period. Very much focusing on the personal reflections, and then there's a lot of focus on the personal challenge. That means every single leader commit themselves to put into practice for self, and we call this small micro adjustments, because we want them to succeed, but we also want this to be very practical and very concrete to improve something. The same thing about the team challenge. So everybody commit to put into practice some of the things they have learned with their team. Again, small micro adjustments to improve. So we have approximately between 1,050 and 1,100 leaders that do this at the same time, and everybody goes through this personal challenge and the team challenge. And we find this extremely powerful, that close to 1,100 leaders are committing themselves to put into practice 1 or 2 small micro adjustments through these modules. And this is done on a continuous basis, year by year by year. So for us, this creates a very strong unified approach to this. And these small micro adjustments is really what we see is very powerful in terms of changing behaviors and actually improving on a regular basis. The final point I wanted to mention to this, we put a lot of focus on knowledge sharing and knowledge exchange. We know that within corporations, most companies actually have the answers to absolutely every issue they have. The problem is that people don't talk to each other across divisions, across functions. So that's why we really focus on establishing peer groups with leaders across the different companies within the Wilhelmsen Group. So they practice together, they share experiences, they build trust and openness, and also then can get advice for improvements with each other. The final thing I just wanted to talk about is that we want to build leaders with a growth mindset. You're most likely familiar with the research of Professor Carol Dweck, who has done a lot of work on mindsets, how people think, because how people think leads to how people act, and how people act becomes then the habit, which then again becomes the culture on how things are done around here locally, in the different areas, and also globally. So we believe that there are opportunities in these difficult times as well, this crisis, and we want to nurture this growth mindset and help leaders who are stuck also in their mind to kind of reinvent their internal map, as we call it. And the reason behind this is because we know that leaders have a tremendous impact on their surroundings. Sometimes leaders don't think about it. At least here in the Scandinavian countries, it's very flat structure, and everybody's kind of equal. But on the other hand, it's not equal, because the leader is the leader, and that person has a tremendous impact on people. So how that leader is feeling, how that leader is acting, and what the words the leader using towards their people has a tremendous impact on their surroundings, the motivation, the productivity, the creativity, and so forth. So we really must ensure that leaders have strong resiliency, are aware of their mindsets and how they're thinking and how they're working, and also in this difficult time are capable of helping their people to build resiliency in order to capture opportunities and not get stuck in a situation of unfortunately mental and physical sickness that we start to see more and more of. So that's what I wanted to cover from my side. And as Wolfgang said, if there are any questions to me at the end, I'm more than happy to provide that to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruud. Yes, I think we are looking forward to a lively discussion after all presentations have been completed. Thank you very much. That was a really interesting, for me, it was a learning experience, actually. Thank you very much. Maria Lisa, may I ask you now to come forward with your presentation?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for invitation. I would ask to show my slides from there as it was promised.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Just give me a
thank you.
second.
So, dear Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. So first of all, best regards from Finland. Actually, today it is snowing in Finland. We had a very warm springtime, but it is easy to see how the climate is changing, and we see that in Nordic countries. I don't speak not so much today about coronavirus or the life exit after that. I'm speaking a little bit more global things. And I'm starting the European Union slide, which is the first one there. Should I change the slides or you? Okay, so first of all, European Union has been for Finland very important. Although we had some critical discussion at the beginning, it was based mainly agriculture, economy, but later on people understood that without the European Union membership, no success in Finland's economy. So why European Union is important for Finland? First of all, our country is small, location far away in north. Then our economy is based on export, big investment, products investment, and then of course our location. Our neighbor is Russia. Finland is a Western country, absolutely, but we need to be friends with our neighbor Russia. And to be between European Union and Russia, it is sometimes a little bit challenging. I don't explain more about European Union, but only I would like to mention that the Ukrainian crisis there, and so look at how close it is, for example, to Finland. That has started the crisis in 2014, the Crimea Peninsula, and now when we listen to the news, we can hear that on Ukraine's eastern border there are some actions happening, and that these have impact on European Union's economy. We have followed all the limitations European Union put on the business between European Union countries and Russia, and we followed exactly the rules. Then I would like to say some things about all the Eastern European Union members. During the last year, I have worked more in Romania, in Bucharest at the university. I have created their strategy and tried to support them to create business collaboration and also internationalization. Here, there, and that area, I could see that maybe European Union Commission was too busy to accept some membership. So my mind is that should be more strict in the future when accepting new memberships. So that is European Union. How is Finland? So in the next slide, I think you have heard that Finland is the happiest country in the world. So already fourth time, but because we Finns are very humble people and hardworking, somebody said that Finland is happiest country in the world. So what? Like as 20 years ago when Finland was on really first country in the world PISA investigation and research. I remember that my colleagues in the Ministry of Education told there must be some mistake because we have so many problems in our education system. So life is going on and we are happiest country in the world, but I should say that also we have a lot of challenges. So one thing I would like to say about the economy and the export. Of course, Nokia made our country rich, but that electronics is no more the biggest export area. That is absolutely all those products which are concerning climate change, green business, and all these what we have heard today. And next area is digitalization. So forest industry has problems, and one thing is that the paper is not so interesting product. We don't read newspapers. Everything is electronic. Also, many countries have paperless offices. But in electronic e-trade, we need package paper, and that might be the next step. Also, everything issue paper, which means the paper we use in our households and everywhere. So we have only 5.5 million inhabitants, but a lot of space. So we need, for example, from India, we have really invited workers to Finland, but that is party political issue. In Finland, we have especially one political party which doesn't accept so well foreigners. And in the same time, we have a lack of workers, which should be very suitable, for example, for Indian people. That is very bad thing here in Finland. Okay, I mentioned the Finnish education system, which is told in my presentation. And that is one of the best education system in Finland. So thanks for Germany and also Great Britain, also Netherlands. 30 years ago, we created the polytechnic system. We created universities of applied sciences, and I'm one of the founder on the west coast. I founded one university of applied sciences in my home city. So that has been very successful story. Of course, I think also in UK especially, I don't know exactly in Germany, but the universities and universities of applied sciences have some, let's say, discussions. That is not we are doing collaboration, but there is a real competition, but in some cases not very fair competition. Best in our education system is that that is tuition fee. So that is one thing. But I tell one example. I have two daughters who are now around 30 years, and older had, when she was very small girl, that dream to become medical doctor. She studied rapidly basic education, then high school, then at university, medical school, bachelor, master, and now she is doing a PhD and also studying in US. And very straight, very rapidly. But then younger Susanna, a little bit more artist, the school was not her first issue. The first basic education, she wanted to go vocational institute and study second level nurse. Then she decided that what about go to that normal gymnasium to high school and study that degree. And then she continued at the university pipe and had a bachelor in social sciences and master in social sciences, and now starting a PhD studies. So what is good? No dead ends, and also that people can study nearby as long as they want, and if they don't have clear dreams and clear issues and plans, they can go there and take studies which are interesting. So then our education purposes for 2030 are very clear in the next presentation. There are Vision 2030. May I see that slide? Next one. So education key asset for Finland in 2030. It means that in 2030, half of our generation has a higher education degree, not only a placement, but has degree. Education should be effective, productive, and competitive in that year latest. Research, development, and innovations are very important. The purpose is 4% of GDP, 4%. And the international collaboration, more than important. Our country is bilingual. We study Finnish, Swedish, then English, Germany. I have studied, I speak German. And also Spanish is very important. We speak a lot of languages. And then we have real roadmaps for our plans. Then let's see some big issues. Because I have been visiting since 1995 in China. 1995. I have seen a lot of changes. And now I have studied the old Silk Road. We have studied it in high school from Xi'an until Rotterdam. And during my visits in China, I have heard great grand stories regarding what President Xi'an is now planning there. That is huge. And coming also to North Pole. I have a connection in Mexico also. In South America, that Silk Road, that One Belt, One Road has established, but in Mexico not. And the reason is that Mexico needs to be very familiar with the US, and there is a black point regarding that Silk Roads, One Belt, One Road issue. Some days ago, I read news that in many months and a few years, it has been told that One Belt, One Road is big project. But we know that President Biden is doing also a project, and that is even bigger. That is that COVID exit project, and that is $5,000 billion. $5,000 billion. It means 25% of US GDP. So now there are two big countries, as we know, doing a big project. So yesterday, I'm speaking a little bit how the business is going on. Of course, coronavirus has been a very, very bad thing, but I see in that very many positive things. I hope that we can change our lives, and the corona exit will be a success story. Digitalization leap in education has been a great story, although there are problems, but anyway, more positive results. Then global trade patterns are nowadays more or less free. Industry digitalization and e-commerce is everyday's happenings. Artificial intelligence. My first degree is in bookkeeping, accountancy, and I have also auditor's degree. So bookkeepers and auditors professions are disappearing. Artificial intelligence is doing them. So what are the professions we are educating young people, and can we educate them well? Globally spread value added, that is good example for Finland, because Finnish industry is big industry, big investment products. So we imported a lot of components and many raw materials for our production. During COVID, big problems, and Finnish big companies decided to draw back some industries so that no more so big risk during times like Corona. So globally spread value added, my mind is that it is no more increasing. Companies and countries are thinking about risk which are happening in cases like Corona. So no more corporate social responsibility. We have spoken about it and listened. Sustainable development is so important. That is in mental, nature, air, everywhere that responsibility is very, very important. I'm telling to my students always cases from Facebook. Think about what people are saying to each others and what they are writing about each others. In many cases, that is terrible. And dear India, increasing economic power of Asian continent, that is important. Then changes in the operating environment. There are changes in the operating environment, strategic thinking. So strategy, good strategy is so important. That is must for every company, entrepreneur, and also countries and societies, every organization. Entrepreneurship, I was smiling when I heard that that is true, that if you are unsuccessful in your business, can you continue the life as before? In Finland, if you are unsuccessful in business, that is like a stamp on your face still. We try to make new decisions and law regarding that, but that is very bad. Service business, service industry. For example, elevator and escalator industry in Finland, that Kone company, that is doing by service industry, the preparing, guiding and everything, and from Finland to different countries. The engineers are no more traveling. They are sitting here and doing benefiting service industry. Need of new innovations. The innovations are everywhere. Digitalization, robotics. So in China, robots are in hotels, and the service is done by algorithm. Tolerance of uncertainty, risk-taking ability. Then at the individual level, knowledge management and rethinking exclusion, internationalization and globalization. We are no more alone. We need each others. We should accept different religion. We need to understand the challenges in Africa, and also my mind is that we need to support them after Corona. That is what I'm thinking in operating environment. So why new innovations are needed? That is very important to understand. The main purpose of every country is the economical growth. That is told in my next slides. So economical growth is needed. So please, next one. So every single country is thinking about economical growth. So easy is the economics to understand that. And we need more and more intangible factors. So we need to connect with the organizations in a local and as well as global scale. And human beings are doing the collaboration. It means the need to watch, monitor, learn, collaborate, support, and help other organizations and communities because we need innovations. Please. Okay, there are those. Then in the next, I'm sharing the innovations in technology innovations, financing innovations, and marketing. Let's take the technological issues first. Please. So Finland was the country who created mobile phones and text messages, but we have so many innovations here. But what is a lack? We have a lack of how to create businesses. So we have a lot of innovations, but in some cases we don't know how to do business with our innovations. So that is what we need, and we will need more how to do business and do marketing. So think about finance. It is years I have visited in any bank, and what is happening with the finance. So artificial intelligence is doing soon everything, and that is very important to understand in the education that also. Then third one is marketing. No papers, no brochures, everything is in the internet. So that also these professions have disappeared totally, and that is very challenging for people and businesses. We know we buy in Finland from Amazon, of course, from Alibaba. We can buy what we want, and they are coming and we can returning. So that is so crazy, the e-commerce. Also, COVID has had very good impact on that marketing. We have learned to buy in e-trade benefiting. Okay, we have many issues for our strategies, and as I mentioned, that strategy for the business is very important, and it is not important enough if you create very good strategy. I'm a very practical person because I'm doing also own business. So for me, it is important to get results. So how is the result? And my favorite method to count the results is balance scorecard, which is told in the figure. There in next figure, so easy that is follow the balance scorecard issues. If you look at the figure in the next slide. So we, first of all, for me, that the finance should be in good condition. Looking at only revenue, expenses, net income, cash flow, and the values. Then what about customers? Are they satisfied? Do we know who are our customers? And what is our market share? Do we know it? So learning and growing up, and how our people, how like my colleague from Norway told about leaderships, how the leaders are doing, and can they lead the
Maria, Dr. Veit, with your permission, Maria, I think we have 2 more speakers. You may like to conclude in the next few minutes, 5 minutes.
Okay, and the next slide, that is from Finland, a picture. Thank you very much. I'm sorry using too much time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Maria-Liisa, for this inspiring talk from Finland. I assume you're in Finland right now.
Yes.
It's a very interesting country I actually haven't had a chance to see yet. So we have covered Europe from 2 different perspectives, from 3 different perspectives actually, and now we are going back, and I would ask Tony to get ready for your presentation. I can see you there waving, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Very well, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. And Mr. Chairman and Dr. Satish, thank you for your invitation. And it's great to know so many people here. My name is Tony from China. And as just the early time, the brief introduction, you know, my institute, the name is Zhejiang Technical Institute of Economics in China. And first, let me briefly introduce my college. Let's go down. Next slide. Help me to next slide. And the next slide. Thank you. And as you know, my college is in the Zhejiang province. Zhejiang province, you know, is near Shanghai, and there are 60 million people. And the capital city is Hangzhou. Is the headquarters of Alibaba company. Just Dr. Maria mentioned Alibaba company, the e-commerce giant. The headquarters is in the capital city of Zhejiang, the Hangzhou, my city. And our institute is a vocational institute. You know, in China, there are 1,400, more than 1,400 vocational colleges. Our college is among the top 100. And so this, we are the center of the UNESCO Universe. UNESCO Universe is the international vocational education and training center, belong to UNESCO. Their headquarters is in Bonn. There are altogether 222 centers all over the world. In China, there are 3 centers. Yeah. Please go next slide. Thank you. The city is Hangzhou. It's a very beautiful city. So here, when the situation becoming normal, I will warmly welcome you to our city. The city Hangzhou is well known as the venue of 2016 G20 summit. So mention G20 summit, you may know the city is so beautiful. And please go down next slide. Help me next slide. Yes, our institute is established in 1978, and there are 31 majors programs, diploma program, and also there are 5 bachelor degree programs. And please go down, go just straight down, straight, go, go. There are many 31 majors here, and including finance, including logistics, including e-commerce, etc. So this is a brief introduction of my institute. Due to the time limits, please go down to the next, just to go straight to next part. I will introduce the changes of the changes points on my reflection on the post-epidemic era. As Dr. Satish told Ricard that the topic is on the after epidemic era. So, since the outbreak of COVID-19, China has implemented large-scale online education. Sorry, please go down. Next slide. Next. Go. Go. Still go. Go on. Yeah, go on. Next. Yes, this slide. Thank you. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, China has implemented large-scale online education covering nearly 300 million teachers and students in universities, primary school, secondary school across the country. Up to now, we control efficiently, but still we have to think about the Tibet, something about. So today I would like to talk, I've got to focus on the 3 aspects. One is the Tibet training mode. The second is Tibet curriculum structure. And the third is Tibet teaching method. During this period, we have to, as I am a teacher also in the Tibet technical, in the Tibet campus, so I focus more concrete measures. So during this period, I'd like to suggest that during we have to consider the 3 major aspects. One is the talent training mode. I think the talent training mode should shift from focusing on the cultivation of vocational skill to the integrated cultivation of professionalism and skills. The ranging, next slide, please. The ranging epidemic can be effectively controlled in China, not only because of the country's scientific prevention or precise measures, but also thanks to many heroes in harm's way, more than 40,000 medical workers on the front line who have left their home, including very old people, very old, top higher medical scientific. So, and also including the delivery men who are running constantly during the epidemic prevention, and also the community watchmen who are on duty day and night. So in face of the danger, everyone knows the preciousness of life. So what makes them overcome fear and bravely fight against the epidemic? So in addition to the awe of life, it is more about their persistence in their career and in their commitment to responsibility. So this is a professionalism of the medical staff and the logistic defenders who are loyal to their duties and dare to take responsibility. So Professionalism is the emotional attitude and quality of will shown by the person in professional activity, which contains the sense of mission, sense of responsibility, dedication, and professional ethics for the profession. The relationship between professionalism and vocational skills is as inseparable as soul and body. So the cultivation of vocational skills naturally contains the cultivation of professionalism. So this is a reflection from the pandemic area, or we have to shift from after the pandemic era. So however, due to the constraints of the fund, equipment, teachers, etc., and impact of utilitarian school running factors, such as graduates' employment rates, counterpart enrollment rates, competition award rates, skill certificate passing rates, etc., vocational schools focus more on their cultivation of students' technical skills and neglect their professionalism, which determines the sustainable development of the students. So students do not have enough awareness the importance of professionalism, and most students regard learning skill and practice skill as the only goal in their campus. So this, the idea we have to shift, and only when we strengthen the professionalism, professional skills training, and pay attention to the cultivation of professionalism, then students can become technical talent who meet the needs of economical transformation and industrial structure upgrading in the new area. So this is the first point I want to say, the training mode we have to shift. And the second I would like to say that is the curriculum structure. Curriculum structure, we say curriculum structure have changed from focusing on the requirements of the professional development of meeting the needs of people's all around development. So as we know, in China, the current curriculum structure in vocational institutes generally consists three basic modules. One is public basic courses. One is professional basic courses. And also the third is professional skill courses, the three parts. It is the curriculum system constructed according to the logical relationship between professional knowledge and skills, which meets the needs of the professional development. However, to a certain extent, it ignores the requirements of people's all around development. So our country, China's education policy is to cultivate the comprehensive development of morality, intelligence, physical education, art and labor, but many schools have made some utilitarian trades-off in process of organization and implementation. So this is a challenge. This is this kind of trade-off is more obvious in general education, and it is also existing in our Tibet, that is vocational education. Based on the thinking that the epidemic has brought people, we need to add courses and content in such as life education, civil moral education, health and safety education, and natural knowledge education to the public basic courses module of vocational. So these courses may be very common in your country, in Germany, in Finland, in other countries, but in China, the policy require this have to put in the teaching content. But in our real situation, we more focus on the skills, the enrollment, employment rate, ignore these aspects. So this is the second aspect I think we have to considered according to China's situation, Tibetan situation. The third, I want to say that is the teaching method. We have to the teaching method has changed from teaching-oriented classroom teaching to learning-oriented diversity teaching. So because of the epidemic, you all know the students have started a home-based learning mode. But at the early 3 months, 2020, after April 2020, all of our schools get normal. Schools, students back to school. So during the first 3 months of the 2020 year, many students start at home. So the learning space has shifted from school to home, and the learning method has changed from offline to online. For example, in early 2020, our college has pushed the learning resources related to various majors on the learning platform and arranged some teachers to open online live classes. Each teacher pushes teaching resources package, including PowerPoint, homework, and links to relevant teaching resources on their own website according to the number of classes. So after 1.5 months of the home-based learning, students have participated in online learning well, and according to the statistic of the school platform. The effectiveness of the learning is still uncertain for the time being, but one thing is certain is that the students' independence learning ability has improved in to some extent. Whether it is to discuss and answer questions on the platform or to complete daily homework, students have to look for answers in the knowledge links given by teachers. Students should collect relevant information and learn relevant knowledge by themselves. In the teaching for reform of vocational education, we have been committed to shifting from teaching-oriented to learning-oriented, but the effect is not satisfactory. Many teachers still believe that the students in vocational schools are poor in basic knowledge and cannot learn independently. And they are not willing to learn independently because of their poor self-discipline. So for the sake of teaching tasks and the teaching progress, they only believe their own teaching, and do not trust the students' learning in face of the implementation of home-based learning. Due to the epidemic, we realize the importance of teaching independent learning and also understand the possibility of learning-based teaching method. So focusing on the learning is not just letting go, but the role of the teacher has to make changes accordingly. The first, to be a guide of students. Second, to be a provider of students. Third is to be an organizer of the students' learning activities, to organize students to communicate and interact with each other and to make corresponding comments and evaluations. So also it is COVID-19 epidemic that has brought a new round of online teaching craze worldwide. It is foreseeable that in future vocational education will maximize the advantages of digitalization, information, intelligence, and networking. So vocational education college, education college student teachers as leaders of vocational education need to face the great differences between traditional education and future education in the continuous challenges and enhance their own information literacy and comprehensive ability. So these are the three aspects I want to share with you. Thank you again for your listening, and it is a great honor to be here. And Mr. Chairman and Dr. Sat, see, I have to say sorry about, I have to say sorry because I have to, another appointment of Zoom meeting. I have to be off. Sorry about this. Yeah,
Okay.
and stay healthy, stay safe, my
Yeah,
friends.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for being here today. Uh, you know, this is your first association with JIMS. I'm happy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see you. Yeah, I'm happy to see you on screen. And I hope there'll be more occasions when you can participate in our events. Thank you very much. I'll be corresponding with you, you know, later. But thank you very much for being here, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you for the presentation. He's gone already, but maybe we can send my thanks to him by email. That was another interesting presentation on the internal restructuring and adjustment to the post-COVID era. Now we are looking forward to the final presentation of Hidekazu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. The floor is yours.
Hi, Hide. How are you?
Yeah, hi. How are you?
Yeah, very well.
Good to see you
Pleasure
again.
to see you again. You're such a
Yeah.
great friend of James like Maria and Dr. Fight. So thank you for being here today. Please continue. Please continue.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Hidekazu Sone. So thank you for your inviting me today. And I'm very happy to see you again. And then, so thank you for Dr. Sesu, specialty Dr. Sesu and the professors. And so when I was a graduate school, I lived in Australia about 1 year, but long years ago, and my English skills poor. So today I will use interpreter, Kasya-san. Thank you.
So I hope you can hear me.
今日私はですね、静岡文化芸術大学というところに所属准教授をしています。
So now I'm teaching at Shizuoka University of Art and Culture.
専門は経営学で、その中でも経営史や経営戦略論をメインとしています。
And my major is the economics.
そうですね。
And especially, I'm deeply involved in the business management.
あとはいろんな長く続く企業の研究をメインにしています。
And especially, I study the company which established for a long time.
私がこの大学があるところが浜松というところで、本学が位置する浜松は人口80万人で、東京と大阪の中間点に位置します。
So, our university is located in Hamamatsu City, where about 800,000 people live at the halfway point between Tokyo and Osaka.
浜松は産業、特に楽器、オートバイ、織物の町としても知られます。
And this city is well known as a city of industry, especially of musical instruments, motorbikes, and textiles.
トヨタ、ホンダ、ヤマハなどですね、世界企業はいずれも浜松に深く関係しています。
Global companies such as Toyota, Honda, or Yamaha are deeply related to this city.
Also, Suzuki, Kawai.
Okay, I have to add Suzuki Motors and Kawai.
あと、手前に見える白い建物がですね、本学になります。
And the white building in the center is our school.
静岡県の公立大学で、地元地域に根ざしながら発展してきました。
It is a prefecture university and deeply rooted in the local community.
鈴木自動車、地元のですね、鈴木自動車、鈴木会長も本学の優秀な学生たちに毎年直接鈴木奨学金の授与をしてくださいます。
Every year, Mr. Osamu Suzuki, CEO of Suzuki Motor Corporation in Hamamatsu, gives Suzuki scholarships directly to our excellent students.
浜松にはやらまいか精神というものが根付いています。先ほど紹介した企業のように新しいことや苦難に挑戦する気象を指します。
People in Hamamatsu possess a unique mind called Yaramaika spirits. Yaramaika spirits will drive us to challenge something innovative or unprecedented, just as done by the global companies I mentioned earlier.
さて、日本でも新型コロナウイルスによる企業への影響が出ています。
Now, we can see impact of coronavirus on business here in Japan too.
こちらの表は倒産件数の変遷を表したものです。
And this chart shows the transition of bankruptcy cases in Japan.
今月の4月16日時点で1330件の倒産件数となっています。
As of April 16 this year, 1,330 bankruptcy cases have been reported.
業種別ではご覧の通りです。また地域別では大都市に位置する企業が多く倒産しています。
By business type, these are the tops of the most affected. By region, many bankruptcy companies are in big cities.
そこで私が長年研究してきた老舗企業を見ながら存続について述べたいと思います。
So today, to see how firms can survive in such hard time, I would like to introduce some strategies of Japanese 老舗 firms, meaning long-established firms, which I have been studying for many years.
老舗企業はこれまで多くの危機を乗り越えてきました。こうした英知が今回のコロナ危機にも役立つと考えています。
In their long history, 老舗 firms have gone through a lot of hardships. So, I think their wisdom will help us find how we can overcome the COVID-19 crisis we are facing now.
ここで皆さんに聞いてみたいと思います。長寿企業が最も多い国はどこだと思いますか？
So now I have a question. What country do you think has the most companies established more than 200 years ago?
もしくはベスト3を考えてみてください。
What country or what top three country? Sorry, what country or what is the top three countries which have all the companies a lot?
この表は200年以上存続した企業を国別にまとめたものです。
So now, this list shows the number of the firms which have been running for more than 200 years by country.
日本、日本はですね、3313社とダントツで多いことがわかります。
Here, you can see the number of Japan is remarkably high as 3,113.
こうした老舗企業や老舗企業を構成するファミリービジネスなどに昨今世界的にも着目がなされています。その一つが地域との関係性に着目した SEW 理論などがあります。
These long-established firms or family businesses realizing such old firms are now attracting attention around the world. One of them is SEW theory, which focuses on the company's relations with local communities.
事例として、この、地元の静岡県の、鈴代を紹介したいと思います。
So, as an example, let me introduce Suzuyo, a local company in Shizuoka Prefecture.
鈴代は、創業1801年、物流を中心に140社にわたるさまざまな分野への多角化としても知られます。現在の会長は8代目です。
Suzuyo's foundation was in 1801. It is well known as its diversified business with 140 group companies. The current CEO is the eighth generation.
So this picture is 8th generations and me and my students.
Yes, can you see the gentleman next to me? So this is the 8th generation CEO.
で鈴代も創業以来多くの経営危機を経験しています。
So Suzuyo has experienced many business crises since its establishment.
失敗談や経験則をもとに会社が倒産しないリスクマネジメントが取られてきました。
Their risk management to avoid bankruptcies is developed based on their own failure stories and rules of thumb from experience.
例えば100年前に投機で失敗し、倒産寸前に至ったことから8代目は幼少期から投機だけはしてはいけない、業績はやれと、実業をやれと先代より言われてきました。
For example, they failed in future trading and came close to bankruptcy 100 years ago. As a child, the eighth head CEO was told by the former head never to gamble, but to do secure business.
こうした経験をもとに生まれたのが友生きという経営理念です。
Through such experience, they came up with their business philosophy, 友生き。
友生きとは、社会、顧客取引先、社員同士、グループ各社の3社で成り立って寄り添う優しさと、自立して生きる厳しさを表します。
友生き literally means living together and consists of 3 parties. 1, society. 2, customers and vendors. And 3, employees and group companies. It tells us that the 3 parties must have compassion to support each other as well as toughness to support themselves to be independent.
かつて長期存続の理由について8代目に聞いたところ、8代目は友生きの理念を受け継ぎ、常に社会と顧客から必要な存在であるよう自己革新し続けたことですと即答されました。
When I asked the ACE CEO before why Suzuyo could survive for such a long time, he immediately answered, because we have inherited Tomoiki mind and keep improving ourselves so that we will be needed by our society and customers.
友生きを軸に、地域の活性化を願い、短期的な収益にこだわらず、時間と労力と費用をかけてでも持続可能な、共生関係を築くことを積み重ねてきたと言えるでしょう。
With Tomoiki mind, Suzuyo wishes to energize the local economy regardless of their short-term profit. They are happy about spending time, labor, and money if they can build up sustainable win-win relations with their partners. This is their wisdom to sustain their business.
また、日本で非常に有名な言葉があります。三方よし経営です。聞いたことがある方おられますか？
Next, here is another famous word in Japan. It is sampoyoshi. Have you ever heard of it?
また近江商人という言葉を聞いたことがありますか？
How about 近江商人?
京都の隣にある地域を、現在滋賀県と言いますが、以前は近江と言いました。
Omi is an old name for current Shiga prefecture, which is next to Kyoto.
そこからたくさんの優秀な商人が輩出されました。
Around the 18th century, Omi region produced a lot of excellent merchants.
ちなみに私の母校も滋賀大学で、近江商人研究の中心であるため、このことを研究してきました。
They were called Omi Shonin, which means the merchants of Omi. I graduated from Shiga University, which is located in current Omi region. and the university is the center of Omi Shonin study. I have been working on this theme.
最近 SDGs などが着目されますが、以前より近江商人の流れを組む日本企業などを中心に実践されてきてました。三方よしとはですね、自社や顧客だけに利益を与えるのではなくて、社会にも還元するということに特徴があります。はい。
三方よし business management can be characterized as it provides profit for not only themselves or their customers, but also societies. Recently, SDGs receive a lot of attention, but actually they have already been practiced at many Japanese companies which have roots in the merchants of Omi.
現代のサステナビリティの源流とも言えるでしょう。日本企業の長期存続にも寄与しているとも言えます。
So we can refer Omi merchant practice to the origin of today's sustainability. We can also say that it has contributed to the longevity of Japanese companies.
商社の伊藤忠商事も近江商人の流れを組みますが、最近改めて三方よし経営に根ざした経営理念を再設定しています。
伊藤忠, a Japanese trading company, is descended from the merchants of Omi, and recently they have renewed their management philosophy to be based on Sampo Yoshi management.
まとめになりますが、何百年と長い年月を乗り越えてきた、老舗企業には特徴があります。
In summary, we can see some unique features in 老舗 firms which have survived for hundreds of years.
大別すると、4点挙げられるというふうに思います。
I think there are four major characteristics.
第一に、未曾有の危機は恒例行事と心得るということです。
First, they think unprecedented crises to be regular events.
第二に、強みを磨くための投資は惜しまないということです。
Second, they do not spare any investments to develop their strong points.
第三に、効率に縛られずステークホルダーとの共生を目指すということです。
Third, they are keen to build good relations with local stakeholders without minding their trouble over time.
そして、第4に、人材育成、内部留保への、意識ということがあります。
Fourth, they are aware of the importance of human resource development and internal reserves.
こうした存続を第一義とした取り組みは、今回のコロナを乗り越える上でもヒントを与えてくれると考えます。
I think these of their efforts for long-lasting business will give us some ideas to buster corona crisis.
駆けになりましたが、ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Hide, if I may interrupt you, how many more minutes would you require? Would you like to conclude in 5 more minutes? 5 more minutes?
Yeah,
No,
already finished.
Last phrase, let me say the last phrase. So, thank you. This is a quick explanation, but I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you very much for your participation. That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hidekazu. That was a really inspiring insight into the, say, ethics of a Japanese corporation towards sustainability. Very interesting and new to me. And again, I learned a lot. That's been the case for all presentations here. And therefore, I think we have, we deserve a couple of minutes to discuss these presentations. Actually, we do have, I just talked to Dr. Seth, we do have 7 minutes of discussion. And I would like to ask attendants to come forward with questions. Raise your hand or just unmute your phone, your microphone so that we can hear you.
Dr. Fight, there are no questions at the moment.
Okay.
So okay, if you like, you can sum up the sessions in the next few minutes, 5-10 minutes.
That would be my pleasure. Actually, I really was very happy that we got this group of speakers together in this panel, because it gave us an idea of the challenges that come from outside to firms worldwide. And at the same time, we got an insight into the specifics of conditions in some countries, like last presentation, Japan, or before Finland. And I understand Glenn Root's presentation to be based on a global experience of his training concepts, or global application of his training concepts. So I think this panel actually provided us with a really interesting insight into the challenges ahead. And I am actually, when I gave my own presentation, I was a little worried. I thought, oh, when I did my research, I thought this will be really tough on international corporations, especially corporations from India. And now that I have listened to the presentations of the speakers, whose subject is not mine, it's a lot of what I've heard was new and interesting to me, I'm a little more optimistic. What I see is that there are tremendous challenges coming, facing the corporations worldwide. But what I also see is that actually the capacity of training, especially leadership training, is enormous and has adjusted to the challenges, has kept up with the challenges that are ahead. And I must say that this is inspiring, because I believe that companies do have the tools to actually cope with the challenges. I saw that in the presentation of Glenn Root, when I really, steering companies through this new and probably uncharted waters. Very much, and the same I identified when I listened to Maya-Lisa, where I saw that the training capacities and the education systems established, for example, in Finland, are not only up to the job, but they are also providing a template. Let me say that actually Germany is looking up to Finland in terms to Finland's fantastic education system. We are always, as educators in Germany, we are always criticized, hey, why can't you repeat the success story of Finland? So that makes me very optimistic as well. So we do have templates for adaptation and adjustment to the challenges ahead. We have these templates, and we saw them in the past 1.5 or 2 hours. And isn't that a wonderful result of this conference? Yes, we did it in 2 hours. We do have suggestions for solutions, especially for those companies that are facing a tough future. That would be basically my roundup. I don't want to repeat the messages of these very well-educated speakers, but I would like to share my optimism about the future with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Veit. It's a pleasure to have you here. If that is the backdrop of Kalyan University, it's excellent. It's a very majestic building. And I enjoyed my visit when I met you 5 years back, not mentioning the excellent hospitality which you showed to me and my wife, and with your wife. Give my regards to her. So thank you very much. It was an excellent session. In fact, all the presenters, the presentations were very, the slides were very, colorful, very picturesque, very rich in content. And some of the insights, it was enjoyable to hear from the presenters. Along with you, Hide and, Maria, they've been associated with the Institute for some time. So it was a pleasure having them. And Glenn, I'm delighted to have you here today. Of course, we've been associated with your institute in Singapore, and through Lena, there have been interactions and exchanges with the institutions in Singapore, the universities. So it's a pleasure having you. I continue with the conversation on mail, and I hope there'll be other occasions when you can, associate with us as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Fait, and all the presenters, Hide, Glenn, Maria, and Tony, who's just left. Jyoti, over to you, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all the esteemed panelists for sharing your most precious knowledge, insights, views, and reviews from the industries that you have been associated with. Truly, it is said that the ones who share their time also share their money. So thank you for enriching us and nourishing that intellectual content for us and making us stand enriched into the world of being global. So this with International Conference 2021 JIMS Kalkaji just takes a small pause here with the technical session 2 coming to an end. So students, please stay tuned as we have the research paper
Namaste.
competition going ahead now. Thank you all.